Yeah, my name is Matsuko Friedland, and I'll be talking about my practicum experience at the BC Library Association, or BCLA. And if you'd like to follow along with the presentation on your own device, the link and the QR code to the slides with notes is on the bottom of the screen. Yeah, I was going to paste it on the chat, but I don't know how to do that right now, so hopefully y'all can get that if you want it. Um, So an overview of the presentation, I'll be starting by introducing myself, BCLA, and my practicum. And then I'll connect my practicum to a PHSP value and knowledge area, as well as the truth and reconciliation call to action. And then I'll share some reflections on my program and practicum. And finally, I'll wrap up with thanks, my references, and contact information. So myself, I wanted to introduce myself and share some of my positionality. My name is Matsuko, and I use they or she pronouns. Either is fine. I'm a first-generation Canadian born to Japanese mother and Jewish American father. I was born on and raised on Lokongwen and Wasanich lands, also known as Victoria, BC, and I've always lived in BC. I'm graduating from the BA Health and Community Services program with a focus area on disability studies. And I'm the founder and current executive director of the PHSP Student Association, which I'm thankful is going to continue after I'm gone. And I'm also the lead coordinator of the Mask Up UVic campaign on campus. And before entering this program, I already had experience with business, web development, design, and digital accessibility. And after graduation, I plan on pursuing a Master of Library Information Science, or MLIS, at San Jose State University, which is also an online program. So moving on to BCLA, my practicum organization. It's a nonprofit association representing some 100 libraries and 500 library workers in BC. And its vision is to ensure all British Columbians have equitable access to information, ideas, and works of the imagination by leading the library community in advocacy, professional development, and support of intellectual freedom. So its values are inclusion and diversity, intellectual freedom, social responsibility, intellectual and ethical integrity, creativity and critical thinking, lifelong learning, and privacy and confidentiality. And I noticed that many of these values are similar to PHSP's values and competencies, as well as parts of HST's professional code of conduct. So on this page, I just sort of pulled a quote from those different PHSP and HST documents to kind of show that. And BCLA's current priorities are accessibility, advocacy, anti-racism, climate action, intellectual freedom, and professional development. And many of these priorities relate to course content in the PHSP program as well. And I wanted to highlight accessibility in particular since it's the most relevant to my chosen focus area of disability studies, as well as the work I did in the practicum. Got some water. So I realized that my practicum location, a library association, isn't so obviously related to public health and social policy as for many of my classmates. So I want to take some time to talk about how public libraries in particular relate to public health. So probably the first thing you think of when you think about libraries is books. And indeed, public libraries support literacy and education, and they're social determinants of health and building blocks for health literacy, which both support positive health outcomes. But public libraries support public health in many more ways than this. Libraries, while they're not perfect, are unique in our society in that members of the public can spend time there without spending money. Or that's kind of the idea, although it doesn't always work in practice. But as a result, public libraries have become somewhat like makeshift day shelters and resource hubs for vulnerable individuals. So libraries and library workers provide a variety of services that support social determinants of health, or SDOH. And here I have on the left side of the screen the Canadian Public Health Association's 14 social determinants of health. And on the right side, I have 23 real examples of SDOH-related library services, and it's from a study in Pennsylvania. So some of it might be US specific, but I think a lot of it still applies in Canada and BC. And the main thing I just wanted to show here was that the list is like quite extensive, and probably goes a lot farther than what you might think initially when thinking about public libraries and library services. And then here I have like an image collage with some examples of library services supporting public health in BC. So we've got a washroom sign, so public restrooms, especially those that are accessible. We got CO2 monitor kits that some libraries are lending out. I have Carnegie Center in the top right. That's in the downtown east side of Vancouver, and it has a library and a community center and a lot of community programs specifically for the community in the downtown east side. We have a presentation going on just to show like the different kinds of programs and presentations, workshops related to health or supporting health in public libraries. And then finally a computer lab where library users can access computers and the internet. Oops. So for my practicum, BCLA is a remote organization, so I completed my practicum at home and largely independently with weekly check-ins and additional meetings. And my overarching goal at BCLA was to learn about the Accessible BC Act and its impact on libraries. And for those that don't know, the ABC Act or ABCA is BC's first accessibility legislation, and it became law just a couple years ago in 2021. It sets the framework for accessibility regulations in BC, and so far it applies to certain prescribed organizations like universities and public libraries. And it will require them to form accessibility committees with the prescribed composition, an accessibility plan, and accessibility feedback mechanism. And some of my major projects and tasks include a website accessibility guide, accessibility consultants directory, and an accessibility training plan. And throughout my practicum, I was also fortunate to have several opportunities to ask and learn about libraries in BC to support my future education and career. Okay, and then now that I've finished introducing myself and BCLA and the practicum, I'm going to make some connections between my practicum experience and a PHSP value and knowledge area, as well as a TRC call to action. So PHSP value that guided me in my placement is collaborative action across all sectors. And there are many connected organizations in the BC library sector, and I got to become more familiar with their roles. For example, provincial and municipal governments, community groups, BCLA and other library sector organizations, and the Disability Alliance of BC, or DABC. And the PHSP knowledge area that stood out to me in my practicum is social and life course determinants of health. And as I previously explained, public libraries do a lot to support social determinants of health. And then for the TRC Truth and Reconciliation Commission call to action, I chose to operationalize, I chose number 22, which is we call upon those who can affect change within the Canadian healthcare system to recognize the value of Aboriginal healing practices and use them in the treatment of Aboriginal patients in collaboration with Aboriginal healers and elders where requested by Aboriginal patients. And I interpreted this call to action with a broader understanding of health, not just an individual's physical health, but including mental, spiritual, community, environmental, cultural, economic health. This is the theme that I saw in First Nations perspectives of health, which is that image on the right side of the screen. It's really pretty. There's like a lot of rings and circles around it. But it's also a theme I saw in disability justice, perspectives of health, and just sort of the idea of social determinants of health in the first place. In some ways I can operationalize this call to action is to ensure Indigenous perspectives are represented in programs and offerings through relationships and consultations. And I got to see some of that happening in BC already. Yeah, I read about it in the BCLA site and also at the conference. There were some talks about some interesting things going on in BC. And then my reflections for the practicum and the program. What did I find most valuable in the placement? I think it would be opportunities to learn about libraries in BC for my future school and career. What are my key insights? I would say gaining a better understanding of different organizations involved in the library sector. What would I do differently? I don't think there's much I would do differently within the practicum context, but I would like to get more direct client experience in the future. And what surprised me was how much of an impact such a small organization can have, because BCLA is maybe about 5 people, and they impact libraries all across BC. And what am I most proud of? Creating resources that we used after I finished the practicum. Okay, so for thanks, there were so many people I wanted to thank, and I was kind of worried that I would forget someone, so I'm just gonna sum it up with PHSP students, faculty, and staff. Like everyone I've interacted with has been really helpful in the program. And from BCLA, I wanted to thank Raina and Stephanie in particular, since I worked with them the most, and they were both very happy to answer all my questions about library life. And I also wanted to thank my mom for letting me move back in with her for the duration of the program, which I acknowledge isn't possible for everyone, but yeah, I'm thankful for that. And I've got a couple of pages of references. And then I just want to finish off with my contact information in case you want to reach out to me after this talk or just keep in touch. There's my LinkedIn, and my email is info@matsuko.ca. Yeah, that's the end. Must ask questions now, I guess.